So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution. Today, I'm going to be discussing 5 things that are a little bit interesting about Nigerian labor law, and I'm going to be comparing them to the United States using my background. It's a pretty interesting topic, the idea of sort of comparative human resources and employment labor law, and I want to just dig on into it. So, without further ado, here's 5 things I found interesting about Nigerian labor law. So, Nigeria is a large country, over 225 million people, 356,000 square miles, or just short of 1 million square kilometers. It's growing rapidly. It has quite a few different languages, including Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo. But it has 525 regional languages in total. It was colonized at different points, specifically by Britain. And as a result, you'll see evidence of this colonization in its labor laws and throughout the country. Um, but it is an important country that people do need to know and do need to compare human resources for. All the labor laws that we're going to be talking about today are covered in the Labor Act, Labor Codes, General Labor and Employments Act. It's easily available throughout the internet, but I recommend checking out the International Labor Organization. It's a United Nations agency that is really important in regulating labor throughout the world, and it can give you insight into all countries with respect to their labor laws and what they have going on. So check them out. There's a link down below. So the first one up is the agreement as to place and manner of spending, and this is to prevent company script. So it says no employer shall impose any contract for the employment of any worker of any terms as to the place where an employee should spend the money and how it should be spent. I think that this is nullified in the United States by the Fair Labor Standards Act because you can't really pay someone in doll hairs, for example. When you do this, but I'm not quite sure where company script is outlawed in the United States. But this is to prevent employees from spending the money, from being required to spend the money at the company store, which is really, a very important thing and something that the United States did not learn initially for a very long time, right? Company script uh, continued until I believe the 1940s. Further, and I think this is one of the more interesting ones, is that it says that you cannot pay an employee where intoxicating liquors or for the retail sale of goods, except in the case of a worker employed on the premises. So, obviously, if if someone works at a grocery store or or something like that, you can pay them there, but you cannot require them to be paid at a certain grocery store. Initially, or liquor store. Initially, I thought that this was more of a moral thing, an idea that you don't want to corrupt people by paying them at the liquor store. But ultimately, now I actually believe that this is more focused on um, making sure that, kind of like the paragraph above, you're not requiring someone to spend their money at a certain place. But I'd like to know, folks who are acquainted with Nigerian labor law or involved in it, let me know in the comments down below. I'm really curious as to the reason for this law. I've seen this law in many places throughout the world. Most of them were post-colonial countries with a recent colonial history. But let me know, what's the history? Why is this happening here in Nigeria? Number two is something that is really important, I think, but again, not covered in American labor law. And it says that no employer may make to a worker an advance of wages in excess of 1 month. Now, I don't I don't think there are any limits at all, period, with respect to advances. I think that clawing them back in the context of minimum wage might be a problem. Um, but so I think it's pretty interesting. In addition, it it does not allow employers to, you know, discount or put interest or any other charges if there's an advance. So as a result, employers have no value in providing an advance, and the pay period for recovery would be over 3 months. And that's where many people don't know this, but if you were to remove wages from a employee, you would have to make sure that you were still above minimum wage. And I think that this is where American labor law would push against this. And frankly, it's just a bad idea. I would encourage I would encourage any employer not to be doing this if I had any advice to give them. In the three spot, we're going to be talking about personal illness. Nigerians get up to 12 days off a year for sickness from work. That is more than mandated by law for the United States. There are no sick days mandated by federal law, but there are in states and in general in regions, right? So the West Coast and the Northeast do have sick days written into their law, but the federal government does not. Uh, Most Americans get some level of sick days from their work, either paid or unpaid. But this is one of the ones that I've seen written into law. At the fourth spot is something really interesting in my book. Uh, Many post-colonial states have some very extensive laws with respect to recruiting, whereas the United States has almost nothing. I mean, there might be some contract law in recruiting and some FLSA and joint employer considerations, but for the most part, uh, federal law has nothing to do with recruiting. Whereas many colonial states have very significant recruiting standards, which include, like here, which include a license to become a recruiter. I wish our recruiters had to have licenses. Last one up at number five is a really interesting one. It says, subject to this section, no woman shall be employed on night work in a public or private industrial undertaking, or in any branch thereof, or in any agricultural undertaking, or any branch thereof. As someone who has worked in industrial HR for most of his career, I this is a tough one. I would have lost some of my best employees in many factories that I've worked, half my employees. So this is a really tough one. I'm concerned, and I'm curious if this is ever enforced. If this is an actual, real, and functioning law, or is this one just on the books? People who have experience with Nigerian labor law, please leave a comment down below. Let me know. Let me know how important this law is to you. I'm curious from my watchers and listeners. What do you think about today's video? Please comment down below, like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.